verschiedenen Positionen tätig war, unter anderem als Dean of International Programs, als Vice President for Global Engagement oder als Vice President for Academic Affairs. Professor Hudzik engagiert sich in vielen Gremien und Organisationen, unter anderem als Präsident der NAFSA oder als Präsident der Association of International Education Administrators. Er forscht und publiziert regelmäßig über Higher Education Internationalization, zuletzt mit seinem Buch Comprehensive Internationalization, Institutional Pathways to Success. Er hat viele internationale Preise gewonnen, so zum Beispiel den Transatlantic Leadership Award der EAIE im Jahr 2014. Professor Hudzik, we are very happy that you came all the way to Bonn for a keynote. Thank you very much. The floor is yours, please.
Thank you. Well, wanted to wait until the end to see if it was worth it. Good morgen. No. Good morgen. Okay, just checking for life out there, okay? I'm sorry, you've heard all my German, and I apologize for the rest of the presentation being in English, but we all have our limitations. You should have, I don't know if it's, yeah, I guess it's in color. You should have this in your books. You probably figured out this is my PowerPoint presentation, okay? There's good news and bad news. The good news is I will not cover every slide, okay? The bad news is I'm going to cover some of them, okay? I had never, until this request came, I'd never really thought in terms of the marketing of international, well, maybe I had, but I hadn't really systematically thought about it. So I've put a slightly different cast to the material that I've talked about for a long time to sort of think about that connection, that marketing connection to internationalization. Now, in some quarters, the word marketing is a naughty word. And in other quarters, it's a reality. All of us market, okay? Whether we are conscious of doing it or not. We market ourselves. Okay, I suppose, standing up here, I'm trying to market something, okay? At least some ideas to try to get them across. So this is actually an important topic that I hadn't quite thought about this way in the past. Now, I chose this title on purpose because, not very elegantly, but it summarizes the major themes I want to cover today. One is comprehensive internationalization. What does that mean? It means something quite different than what we tended to think of internationalization being about from post-war until about the year 2000. And then something significant began to change. So that's one thing. I also want to talk about this thing taking place in a more conflicted environment. Have you noticed? A lot of people don't like globalization. A lot of people haven't liked it for a long time. And now they have voices. Okay? That's the conflicted environment I want to talk about. And the third theme I want to pursue is the emergence of a global marketplace for higher education. Okay? So I'm going to put those three things together to talk about the environment within which we all do our jobs. I am an internationalist. I take pills for it every morning, but no, so I ran an international office. I was, as you heard earlier, dean of our international programs. And when I moved into the provost office, one of my jobs was to figure out how to internationalize the entire institution, not just the international office. And that brought a lot of challenges, okay, and I guess you could say too, opportunities. So I speak on this topic with some passion because I think it's important. Now, I have a lot of colleagues in the United States running around like chickens with their heads cut off because they're all concerned about Trump, okay? By the way, he's going to be in Europe starting tomorrow. Could you please keep him? Okay? So, but you've got Brexit. You look at the French election. What did she end up getting? 40% of the vote or something like that? Okay, that's not insignificant. We all know there are issues in Germany as well. And the country list keeps growing where there are issues. But I'm going to argue that the world of internationalization and globalization is not coming to an end. Okay? We're hitting some speed bumps. You know, those annoying things that ruin your car when you go too fast through some residential neighborhood. So that's what I want to talk about. And, oh, good, it worked. So I'm not a marketer per se. When I was an undergraduate, I took a course in marketing one time. I've forgotten just about everything that I heard in that course except for maybe one thing. As I sort of understand marketing, it's to figure out ways to connect buyers with suppliers of goods and services where people want to do a trade. Okay? I'm going to focus on the demand side today. The folks who want to buy something or access something called internationalization. And what do they mean by that? But I want to do this in terms of thinking about the environment within which this buying, selling, marketing, putting buyers and sellers together, because different environments lead to different kinds of marketing strategies. So, for example, if the economy is very bad and you're trying to increase mobility, you're going to follow one set of strategies. But if the economy is red hot and there is more money than people know what to do with, you're probably going to follow another strategy, and so on and so forth. So that environment that I want to talk about is really shaped by today. Okay, tomorrow may be shaped by something, well, maybe not by tomorrow, but the things that are the really critical shapers of the environment within which we all do our work. Today, for me, are shaped by that. I've already mentioned that from the title, and I'm going to speak about each one of these in just a minute. By the uncertainties from populist reactions to globalization, okay? And that's about the kindest way I can put it. And expansion and leveling. Okay, I don't mean leveling as in everybody sinking to a new low. Rather, I mean leveling in terms of global development of higher education capacity and systems, not just in education, but in research. And that has massive implications for those of us who have been comfortable living in highly developed countries. Okay? We have new people on the block, and they are influential, and they are building their own capacities and their own qualities, and it's going to have tremendous implications for how we choose to live, work, and compete in a global environment. We've had it easy. We've had it easy in the United States, and you've had it easy in Germany. So that leveling has consequences, leveling up of capacity. So I'll talk about those three things. So let's get on with it. Factor one, strategic and comprehensive internationalization. I'm going to use those two words together. They aren't quite the same thing. But one of the things that comprehensive internationalization is that it is an institutional, universities, colleges, higher education, strategic approach to thinking about how to internationalize the institution, okay? It's not just a little piece of action. It rises to the core of the institution and its core values. And developing an institutional strategy to internationalize is far, far different than somebody in the international office all by themselves trying to figure out how to get more students to study abroad. That's part of it. I'm not dismissing that, please. I'm not dismissing that, but it's only a part of it. So we go to a definition. What is it? Commitment and action. Now, those of you who've labored in higher education know that there's almost no president, vice chancellor, rector, whatever they're called, okay, today who doesn't go out, usually on the first day of assuming office and making the big speech, and saying, we are going to make this one of the most internationalized institutions in the world. Everybody almost has to say it. And then we also know that very few follow up with real action. A lot of words, no action. And so the point here is that it's commitment and action to infuse and integrate. I'll say more about that in just a moment. This international perspective throughout all of the institution's missions. What do I mean by that? Teaching, learning. That has historically been the focus of internationalization in higher education, teaching and learning. But also the research and scholarship portion of the institution's missions. And now, of even greater importance, is the service missions to the public. Okay? I'm going to connect that last one, the service missions to the public, with this populist reaction to globalization. We have failed in our jobs in higher education to pay attention to this third one. But the point is, commitment and action to infuse and integrate international global comparative content and perspective throughout all the core missions of higher education: teaching, learning, research, scholarship, public service, problem solving. Infuse, not adding a fourth mission. Okay? Higher education's missions are the three that are up there in the definition. I'm not arguing to add a fourth mission. Oh, fourth mission, internationalization. Okay? Because guess what? If in good times you add on a new mission, when things get tough and money gets skinny, what happens to the fourth mission? It gets subtracted off. Okay? And actually, if it becomes a fourth mission, it's never really something that's pulled into really what we're here for: teaching, learning, research, scholarship, community problem solving. It's sort of another thing we do. Oh, it's another thing in competition for scarce resources. We don't even have enough money to do the three that we're supposed to be doing. Okay? I'll say more about this in a moment. Benefit core learning and scholarship outcomes. So what do we count? We count easy things. Oh, we had a 10% increase in the number of students going abroad from last year. Okay? We have 1,000 more international students. Millions more international students coming to Germany. Whoopee. Okay? Those are inputs or outputs at best. The real issue is by doing those things, by spending time and money on doing those things, what are we getting for it? All those students engaged in study abroad, they learn anything? Can we document that they've learned anything? Okay? We don't do a lot with that outcome stuff. Why? It's very tough to do. So, on the one hand, I'm slapping us on the one side of the head, and on the other hand saying, well, okay, we all know there are reasons for this. But it's a critical issue, because as internationalization attracts more time, more attention, more resources, people begin asking the question, what are we getting for it? When there wasn't much happening, you could sort of hide it, okay? Is internationalization a good thing? Oh, yeah, okay? How much of it are we doing? Well, not too much. Well, okay, keep doing it then, okay? But as it becomes more visible, it becomes more visible, okay? Building synergies across missions. Money is tight, scarce in higher education systems just about every place. There are always exceptions, but just about every place. And so responsible administrators try to figure out ways in which, sorry for this colloquialism, but a given expenditure of resources, you can get twofers and threefers, okay? So you spend resources on an education abroad program, that's a one-fer for students. But you also provide opportunities for faculty to become engaged abroad with the same program. That's a twofer, okay? And maybe they get their research agendas going through contacts and so on and so forth. We're looking for these synergies across missions. So that's comprehensive internationalization. So what's happening really? Well, as I said, we used to think in terms of mobility, in and out, okay? Which is okay, fine, a very important part of internationalization. I'm not dismissing that. But the American Council for Education a few years ago, and they've just published new results, which I don't have here, but the patterns and trends are almost exactly the same, asked institutions in the United States, sorry, that's the data I have, but they asked institutions in the United States, so what kind of things are you doing to internationalize? Now, PhD, those are doctoral research institutions, MA, master's institutions, four-year baccalaureate institutions, and community colleges, two-year community colleges. Look at those numbers. The percentage of institutions responding who said, we're not just trying to send students out the door, we want international students on our campuses. Now, let's be honest, okay? There is a high road and a low road motivation for doing that. My low road motivation for doing that is more money, right? The high road motivation is taking advantage of those international students in a way, but integrating them into the campus environment and figuring out how you benefit on campus from that. Internationalizing the curriculum at home. You're not going to send everybody abroad to study. What do you do with the students that get stuck home? What do they get? And the answer is they better get something out of the curriculum that's on campus. And how do you do that? So there's a whole new industry, if I can put it that way now, beginning really to blossom about internationalizing the on-campus curriculum and what that means. Faculty research opportunities abroad. It's sort of hard to think about internationalizing teaching and learning if the faculty can't even spell a word. Okay? So how do you develop faculty connections and their contacts abroad? And how do you help them to bring international comparative content perspective to the classroom? Oops, that was a little too fast there. And then strategic research partnerships with institutions, governments, and companies abroad. Now, there were some other things on the list, but these are the ones that attracted the big numbers, okay? Those are big numbers. You know what really surprised me when I saw it? Yeah. We think about the doctoral and research institutions, the big guys, so to speak, doing these things. But how about the community colleges? Okay? Or just four-year baccalaureate institutions. Those are big numbers across the board. Now, I'm not holding these data up to say, aren't we wonderful? Because my suspicion is that if you were able to collect comparable data in other places, you'd see a pattern, okay, in terms of increased participation across this range of issues and actions related to internationalization. So this is, I stole this with permission. I stole it and then I asked permission from the University of Nottingham, who think in terms of two dimensions on which they think about their international programming institution-wide. One is what you would call scale. So are we talking just about a few programs or majors, or are we talking about every program and major and department on campus? That's one dimension. The other dimension, are we talking only about one mission or multiple missions? Teaching, learning, research, scholarship, and community engagement. So the red box at the bottom is not a left-wing plot, okay. The red box in the bottom right-hand corner reflects the interest, the growing interest on the part of institutions to think in terms of everybody at the institution ought to be involved in this. That's the scale issue. And the other is all three missions, and that's the scope issue. So there are other boxes provide other opportunities. However, if you look at the kind of information, it's mainly anecdotal. Don't ask me for my data, because I don't have data. I have anecdotes, okay? You know what anecdotes are, right? Stories that you can use that aren't necessarily empirical or systematic. But if they fit your mind frame, you accept them as being very good evidence, right? So that's where we are. All right. Many institutions are forcing the way they think about internationalization toward that fourth quadrant. And mainly that's the comprehensive institutions, the research and doctoral institutions. But even they allow programming in those other quadrants. But number two becomes, second point becomes very important. Increasingly now, as internationalization in one way or another begins to appear in institutional mission statements and institutional core value statements, now someone starts asking the question, so you're proposing a program in Bangladesh, right? So how does this fit the institutional strategic plan? Oops. That's a big question. And the answer to that question is not always easy. But it's there when the mission statement says we are internationalizing. That has some implications for what our institutional priorities are, okay? Most institutions, though, seek a mix across these four quadrants. Decision makers and sources of influence. So if you're going to market something, you got to talk to somebody, right? So who are you going to talk to? Well, when the world was a lot simpler in internationalization, who'd you talk to? You probably went to the international office, didn't you? Or some faculty member from institution X that you found wandering around in the street someplace, okay, and you had a conversation with them. It becomes more complicated now. And the criteria that they are going to use, there's multiple days now, are going to use to decide whether to do business with you or not becomes much more complex. We all know this. How many of you may have already asked this question, but I'll try it again. How many of you either have or do work in an international office? Okay, good, all right. How many times have you said, why don't they appreciate us? The they is everybody else, okay? All right? All right, well, here's my answer to that question. Beware what you wish. Because now, in your international sandbox, you've got a lot more players. And they don't share all your values. And I can assure you, they also have different priorities. And some of them have not been sandbox trained, okay? They throw sand, okay? They're not nice people when it comes to our world, okay? So you've sort of got to, you've got to think, you got what you wished, much more attention, but you also got a lot more diversity in what people expect out of internationalization and the priorities they want to set. So you want to do a study abroad program in Bangladesh? Absolutely. I like the way you play along, okay? But I may be a dean of engineering who says, fine, but what are the research opportunities for my faculty in Bangladesh? Okay? You see where this conversation is going? It becomes far more complex. In the long run, it's good, but who you talk to and negotiate with the wrong people, you get wrong answers. Okay? That's the reality. So that world of who you talk to is changing, being driven by this comprehensive internationalization thing, so to speak. Extending the leadership team for comprehensive, okay, this is the big one, okay? Comprehensive internationalization is not possible if the responsibility of the international office alone. Forget it. Can't happen with just the international office involved. Success requires multiple points of leadership. From the top, you know, I had a president when I was dean who never, ever missed an opportunity making a speech on campus or out in the public or wherever he was saying, here's what we're doing in international at Michigan State University. That was great for me because the issue never went away. And I could always say to a recalcitrant dean, well, you know, the president is sort of interested in this, okay? Which led to other conversations, right? But it was also a two-edged sword because this president would call me up every Sunday night, wind me up for the week and say, what are you doing for international in the coming week, you know? I won't tell you what my wife called him one time, but anyway. So leadership from the top, leadership from the middle, departmental chairs and deans. Those folks are incredibly powerful in most institutions. They sit at the place where they control resources, they control decisions about promotion and tenure and hiring and firing and so forth. You better have them on board or not much is going to happen. And then I used to call it and the bottom, but that was really misstated. It's the base. Who's the base? E.g., an example, influential faculty. On every campus, every institution, there are a few faculty that when they speak, everyone listens. Sometimes out of fear or what, you don't know, but they listen, okay? So leadership from all those places. Extending the leadership team is the key responsibility of top leadership and the senior international officer. That's what SIO stands for. So to whom do you market and talk? Look at the list. It just got wider and deeper. Okay? So who wants what? Well, that's a complicated answer. Complicated question with complicated. Who wants what from internationalization? We all come to the table with a different set of lenses on. And our lenses filter out some things and give priority to other things. And it's largely dependent on what you do for your job or a living. So I got a whole bunch of, I'd have more up here, but I ran out of room to put circles, and my PowerPoint design skills are not good enough to figure out how to fit more circles in there. But those are the big ones, okay? All those people have expectations from internationalization. Some of their expectations overlap. Some are contradictory, inherently so. Doing something for a student may not be what the faculty want to see happen, okay? For instance, how one prioritizes resources. So they'll view the end game differently. So I look at institutions and leadership. Reputation building. So is this going to get us, you made a comment about I don't like rankings, right? Huh? That she was being very kind. I hate rankings. I think they're the worst thing that happened to higher education in the last 100 years. That's another speech, okay? I won't get into it today. I'll just leave you hanging on that one, okay? But building reputation, institutional reputation becomes very important. Well, I can't tell, at least a half a dozen presidents and rectors who I've spoken to within the last year have all talked about their commitment to internationalization because they're going to go from 150 to 120. Okay? Whoopee. So you look at those. It's going to enhance our capacity, service to constituents, advancing core values. Students, prepare me for a global environment of jobs and careers, learning that is both relevant and interesting. Geez, I'd like it to be interesting too, by the way, okay. Connections for life. What's not on that list? Things like intercultural awareness, okay? Gaining knowledge and understanding of people from other cultures. Now, why is that not on the list? I'm not against those things. I think they're critical and really lie at the core of building global and international understanding. But if you talk to students these days, that's what they want to know about. By the way, so do their families. I'm going to spend how much money sending my student abroad? What are they going to get out of that? I'd not recommend that you say intercultural awareness. Okay? All right. So what I'm trying to point out here a little bit, unfairly so, drawing a distinction that doesn't exist, is that the motivations for students to engage in internationalization are changing. And it's not like we're suddenly going to leave intercultural awareness and all that important set of things behind, but the market has to respond to where the market is, okay? Faculty, so how's this going to help me in my research and publication and funding? And oh, by the way, will it also improve my teaching and learning and personal reputation and standing? Okay? Faculty have those interests. We all know that. Communities and governments, solve problems, create global market opportunity, workforce-ready graduates. What do institutions of higher learning in Germany, I asked the same question about in the United States, do to help some communities with job dislocations forced by globalization? Are there ways to develop markets? Are there ways to develop connections? So forth for communities. Linked to outcomes, okay, back to the outcome thing. Learning outcomes, research scholarship outcomes, sustained institutional capacity building. Say more about that in a minute. Will a particular international effort that you're trying to advance or market help with any of these for an institution? If the answer is yes, you're going to have somebody's ear. Build support through integration. There aren't enough new funds available to virtually any institution to fully or even substantially undertake an ambitious CI effort. Not even the rich of the rich. Harvard, last time I looked, has a $25 billion endowment fund. So much money they don't know what to do with it. I'm serious. But even Harvard doesn't have enough money to fund it with new money. The alternative is through reallocations and what some people refer to as dual purposing of existing resources. Higher education institutions are already spending millions. Some are spending billions. When I was provost at Michigan State, my annual budget that I could play with, actually not much playroom, a lot of constraints, was $2.3 billion a year, okay? But I couldn't afford internationalization without dual purposing. So what are examples of dual purposing? And this has implications for you as well. You don't have to add new courses to internationalize. You can take the existing curriculum and add global courses, curriculum, comparative perspective, and so forth. You're already spending money. You've hired faculty to do the job. You're already spending money. The course is already there. Just tweak it to a 21st century global environment. Build on existing institutional research priorities and thrusts. So, for example, at my institution, we're big in water. Almost sounds like a Trumpism, doesn't it? But We have a very, very good research and outreach and problem-solving capacity when it comes to issues of fresh water. Somebody said, hey, is that a problem elsewhere in the world? Duh, okay? So suddenly, we developed this huge capacity in international development work dealing with issues of fresh and sustainable water supply, okay? We didn't start something new. We just projected it to a different place and location and build on existing faculty research. Implications for you and suppliers: understand what the buyer has and wants to build on or augment, okay? So you got to get into the mentally into the institution and say, what are they good at? Or what do they want to be good at? And what can I do or sell or offer? Sorry to be using all these pejorative terms in some circles like sell and all that kind of stuff. But that's part of what we're about, okay? How do we connect with them and where they are, as opposed to connect them to where we are? There's a big difference there in how you enter the conversation. Different institutional paths for internationalization. Different missions, different starting points, different ways of operating. Some institutions have done nothing internationally, some have been engaged for decades and longer. Implications: there is no best way to internationalize. The best model for any institution is the one that fits its missions and circumstances. And there are almost no, I should take out the word almost, but it frightens me if I do, so I put almost in as a qualifier. There are almost no two institutions alike. Implication for suppliers is the need for product diversification, okay, and differentiation. Cookie cutter approaches don't work in almost anything in this field. So you have experience of programs and so forth, but simply, and we learned this in so many areas of social and policy science, you just don't pick up something that worked one place and plop it down and expect it's going to work exactly the same way someplace else. So what we're talking about here is, on that bottom right-hand corner, internationalization examples, but the whole point of internationalization is that it is supposed to benefit all of these other institutional priorities and so forth. That's the connection that we're looking for. So, second theme, higher education internationalization in a more conflicted environment. All right, so I'm going to have some words up here. You all know about that, right? Anti-immigration, xenophobia, nationalism, sovereignty, they've always been there. They're just very visible at the moment. But you know what else has always been, at least been there for the last 2 or 3 decades, is this list of things. Trade-inspired job dislocations. You know, if you didn't have that and perceptions of disparity over globalization's consequences, what am I getting out of this globalization thing? Nothing. Who is getting something out of it? The fat cats. Okay? All right? If you didn't have those two things, third and fourth item on the list, compounded by the first and second items on the list, you'd have less of an issue. But you got them both. One set's more recent, but the other set is long-standing. And they feed one another. So, resurgent, inward-focused populism is the consequence. Foreigners out. Don't be buying any stuff from China. Okay? Okay to sell stuff to China, but don't be buying any stuff from China. Okay? Distrust or irrelevancy of established leadership. You look at the Brexit. I'm a political scientist by background and training. You look at the Brexit results. The population was not listening to their leadership. They didn't trust their leadership. Okay? And that's part of the consequences of not paying attention to real problems. Big question, how permanent is it and what are history's lessons? I'll give you 2 conflicting lessons from history. Demagogues make promises they can't keep. And when the people find out that they can't keep them, they get rid of them. However, if the underlying problems aren't dealt with, a new demagogue comes along, okay? So that's why I want to transition to what's this have to do with us in higher education. Globalization, internationalization. They're often confused as meaning the same thing, as synonyms, and they're really quite different. Globalization is about forces of all kinds crossing borders almost unimpeded. From disease, to terrorism, to ideas, to money, you name it. Borders have become almost irrelevant. Airports don't just ship people. They ship lots of other things along with people, okay, part of the baggage. The invasion of the global impacting the local cannot be effectively controlled by appeals to nationalism, okay? It just doesn't work. It's like building a Maginot Line, okay, or building a fence between the United States and Mexico, okay, as another example. Internationalization. What's that about? It's understanding, mediating, and helping to negotiate global phenomena. So how do we build productive relationships across national boundaries? That's partly what internationalization of higher education is about. And it's a function of helping societies, yo-ho, all of society negotiate the impacts of globalization. And that's where we have fallen down, okay? We've not really paid much attention to those folks who are getting run over by globalization. And you can't ignore it. You can't just say, oh, too bad, that's the way it goes with globalization. Some people win, some people lose. Ignore it at your peril. And you have Brexit, and you have Trump, and you have Marine, and you have et cetera. Our failure, inward communication. What do? We're doing it right now, folks. We're all in this room together. We're all converted. We talk to ourselves. You say, what do you think about this internationalization stuff? You say, I think it's great. I say, I absolutely agree with you. Let's go get a beer. Okay? Who are we not talking to? We're talking about the folks not in higher education. We're not talking to the folks in our communities who are dispossessed, turned upside down by globalization. Our growing responsibility is to consider how higher education, internationalization, can mediate the local and the global for the entirety of our societies. And that is the third mission: commitment and action to public education, scholarship, problem solving, policies to encourage a more inclusive internationalization. Okay? That is a long sentence and a tall order to fill. Now, we can live in our ivory tower if we want to, but sooner or later, more and more people begin to think of us as highly irrelevant, okay, to what's impacting their lives and their livelihood and the rest of it. So that third mission, predictions, okay, so my colleagues who are running around like chickens with their heads cut off, I say, hard for me not to mention a name, so I won't, but I say, don't worry, it'll be okay. Because I truly believe this. Internationalization of higher education will continue to move forward despite a more conflicted environment. Why? The forces of globalization are not reversing themselves. They're continuing. And all the reasons to internationalize, forced by globalization or forced by just wanting to do the right thing, they're not turning backwards. So we got a couple of speed bumps in the road here, okay? The second prediction I'll make is that internationalizing the third mission will become more and more important under a comprehensive model of internationalization. So I don't know if you want to get into this quote-unquote product line, okay, but this is another thing that institutions are going to have to respond to, and many are already beginning to think, how do we do this? That's the big question. How do we do this? Okay? And we ought to have a few conferences on how do you do that, okay? And I'm not just everybody, okay? I think this is going to be a theme in EAIE coming up, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be a theme in this coming years, a year from now, NAFSA and so forth. How do I know that? I don't know. I just know that. So we've got some tensions, though. And part of those tensions are, as we begin to internationalize our institutions, the public down there begin to look at us and say, what are you doing with all these foreigners? Okay? Well, what are you doing for us? Okay? All those international students who come in here, they're taking spaces away from our kids. Okay? You set up a not very healthy environment. And so it becomes really critical how we document the outcomes, benefits from internationalization. And we don't do that. And benefits to whom? To the public. Don't say this. One of the big outcomes from internationalization is that our faculty publications have tripled in the last 10 years. Okay? I don't even have to ask you the question. I will, though. What's the public going to say? Okay, what they're going to say, we can't say in polite company. Okay? So it has to be expressed in terms important to them and their lives and their jobs and what's happening to their kids and their opportunities. And some pretty simple things like peace and security, bread on the table, okay? How's this helping me with those things? Big issues for every institution. Bottom line, pressure will be on partners and vendors to help with these. Third factor, emergence and strengthening of global higher education system and market. Now, I'm going to go through this stuff pretty quickly because it's there and I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but I want to hit a couple of high points. First driver of what? Emergence and strengthening of a global higher education system and market. First of all, the globalization of nearly everything. Local conditions are increasingly tied to global conditions and vice versa. We can all think of very concrete examples. Very concrete examples are the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And every one of those things. However, sometimes we don't think about this. The globalization of the source of ideas and cutting-edge knowledge, brain circulation and global competition for talent. The flow of talent used to be called brain drain. It's still there, but it's mediated by something else now. And where was the draining to? Places like Germany, like the United States, okay? When I was provost, I had the dean of natural science come into me and say, John, our very best biochemist just got an outside offer, from another institution. And we desperately want to keep him. I said, okay, so what's it going to take? Well, he said, interestingly enough, he really doesn't want salary. That's what I said, like, get rid of him. Something wrong with this guy, okay? I said, well, what does he want? He said, he wants a lot of money to set up a new research lab and a new area of inquiry. I said, okay, how much is that going to cost? Dean said, just about gave me a heart attack, $12 million. I said, you want me to spend $12 million on a whole bunch of new Tinker toys so that we can keep this biochemist? He said, absolutely. I said, okay, well, I'm not sure I have $12 million. Actually, I was sure I didn't have $12 million. But you know what the reality was here? Guess who was stealing one of my best faculty members? Naughty people. The National University of Singapore, okay? They had the money, and they were going to invest in the future. Competition for talent went global. Gone global. Where do the best ideas come from? All over the place. So we talk more now about brain circulation and global competition for talent. You know, it's a merry-go-round. You look at where some of the best faculty, best researchers go, they don't stop in one place. They keep hopping around all over the place. So do the best students. The best students are looking for multiple experiences that build their resume or their portfolio or whatever you want to call it these days, okay? Driver 2, rapidly expanding global higher education capacity and demand. I'll give you some data in just a minute. That has the consequence of increasing competition and opportunities for collaboration across borders. Two-edged sword. They go together. Driver 3, high cost of cutting edge education and discovery. Stephen Tupe, no longer, but he had all three of these titles at one point. President, Vice Chancellor, and Rector of the University of British Columbia. Okay, and he wrote a piece one time talking about the competition for talent and the cost of cutting edge knowledge. He said, my institution can't afford it on its own. It has to find partners. And increasingly, my institution looks for partners across borders. So they were doing deals in Germany, and they were doing British Columbia, and doing deals in Singapore, and doing deals in even the United States, okay, next door, to try to figure out how to load share the cost to gain access to cutting edge talent and information. So where are we? Global shifts in research education capacity. So here's some data. I'll go through it very quickly. These numbers are rounded. You can tell they're rounded because they're rounded numbers. But if you go back to the late 90s, 2000, there were about 100 million seats in higher education in the world. Today, that number is getting close to 2, okay? Projection is for 300 million or more by the year 2025 or 2030, okay? Huge expansion of educational capacity. Where's most of it taking place? Not here, not in North America, okay? Not in Europe, not in the Antipodes, but all those other places listed up there. Mobility. Now here's the big lie, okay? Well, it's not a deliberate lie, it's just sort of like what we're forgetting to tell you, okay? If you look at OECD or the UN or anybody else's sort of official statistics about how many mobile students there are, you know, we're somewhere between 4.5 million and 5 million today, okay? Balderdash. You know what that word means? Means junk, okay? Not true. Because huge pieces of mobility are not being counted in the official statistics. Okay, what's being counted? You get a visa, you get counted. You get a student visa, you get counted. You don't get a student visa, you're highly likely not to be counted. Where is growth and mobility today? Outside of year-long, semester-length, or degree-seeking program students, but rather students who are going on shorter-term programs, internships, other sorts of active learning, things that do not require a student visa. You add all that stuff in. Here is my unofficial estimation, which you can take to the bank. Probably won't get anything for it, but you can take it to the bank, okay? I think the real number today is somewhere between 8 and 10 million mobile students. I look at percentages of students who go on the more traditional programs, percentage of students who go on the more contemporary alternative rights. You just do a little head count and do the math, okay? You only need a small envelope to do the math on. And I think actually we're headed easily toward 12 to 16 million in the not too distant future. Growth industry. for those smart enough to figure out how to diversify the product line. Or ignore it. That's the choice. Multidirectional talent flows, brain circulation, brain competition, proliferation of provider competitors, for-profits, not-for-profits. Okay, you all know the list. Expanding global middle class, all right? The World Bank, I'm not quite sure I buy their conclusion here, but the World Bank says that by the year 2030, approximately, there will be 4.9 billion people in the middle class globally. It's up from, I don't know what the number is right now, 1.7, 1.8, something like that, okay? That's a huge increase. You also have to be a little careful about their definition of what constitutes your being able to join the middle class. But even if you had just a billion more in the middle class, huge consequences for higher education. What's the first thing that new entrants to the middle class invest in? Advanced education for their kids. And they find a way to do it, okay? Governments are going to have a stroke trying to figure out how to afford all those new spaces. Guess what? They aren't going to do it. So who's going to pay? The middle class, because they got money now to do it with. And guess what? When government is paying the bill, people don't ask a lot of questions. When you're paying the bill, you start asking a lot of questions like, so how much is this costing me? How much? And what is my kid getting for this? Okay? And oh, by the way, if I'm going to send my kid someplace, I'm going to send them someplace where I get value for money. So people start shopping around. So there's going to be a very fluid movement of mobile students, market-driven by quality and price. Whoa. What happened? Okay, well, too bad. I can see it here, so. All right, so click and share. All right, anyway. So, all right. Oh, no, that's on. No? This is what you need the smart people for, not just the people who talk, okay? All right, so another little piece of data, okay? And this has to do with a shift in research and development funding globally. All right, now, these data are aggregated and summarized almost out of reality, but close enough to make the picture. You look at 1996, you compare it to 2015. And you look at the percent of the portion of global research and development expenditures. You see the shift? EU, North America, 27, 36%. The rest of the world, you can do the math, okay? If you look at 2015, we've dropped in proportion, you've dropped in proportion. Look at who's gone up the hill, okay? And more recent data, which I've just seen, like 3 days ago, but I couldn't get it into this. The trend is continuing, okay? Implication, multiple sites throughout the world where cutting-edge research and discovery is going on. If you want access to cutting-edge information, you've got to engage globally. And that's putting pressure on faculty, the research and scholarship agenda, and community problem-solving agenda. The best ideas don't come from home anymore, if they ever did, okay? Okay, so you can look at that one. It just says who's spending what at the moment. This is sort of interesting. Publication co-authorship. Co-authorship on publications is going up, especially in science fields, because now there is a movement in lots of places to make sure that if your student actually helped you with your research, your name should go on the article too. Okay, so you have some science and engineering articles that may have 8, 9, 10 co-authors listed with them, okay? And they're real. I mean, I'm not trying to say that that's just a bunch of chicanery, but what's really interesting is that while co-authored domestic, that is, the co-authors were from the same country, grew. Co-author international, meaning at least one of the authors was from a different country, grew by 300% during this period of time. You know what that signals, okay? That signals a lot of important things, not the least of which is, how do faculty reputations get built? How do institution reputations get built? They get built by publication citation rates. Guess what? Citation rates for international co-authorship are much higher than they are for domestic co-authorship. So the smart faculty member says, let me go find myself a colleague from China or from Brazil or from Germany, okay, who I can add to the list. All right, I'm going to end with this. You'll know there are a lot more slides there. All those slides are at the end on purpose, because I knew I wasn't going to get to them, but they're there for your reference. But I just want to make a couple of points about mobility, because after all, we return to our roots, and we're really talking about moving people and ideas, and not just students, but faculty. And by the way, you can add staff to that formula as well. So, some forecasts. Increased global demand for higher education will impact access, price, and quality in ways similar to other globally traded services and products. Okay, I come from Michigan in the United States. Do you know what Michigan was famous for? I'll give you a hint. In Michigan is a place called Detroit. Do you know what Detroit was famous for? Cars, okay? Detroit is only marginally famous for cars anymore. Why? Global marketplace for automobiles, okay? Now, you'll find this surprising. Okay, you in particular will find this surprising. J.D. Power, which is a quality control measuring, global measuring system, what do you think is the #1 most reliable car in the world right now, according to their data?
Must be German.
Huh?
Must be German.
Oh, you think? Why would I be telling you this if it was German? Ready? You ever hear of this car? Kia. Huh? Korea. They didn't even make cars 30 years ago, okay? So what happens when you globalize a market for any commodity, you get very different competition regarding price and quality and reliability and all the rest of those things. That is happening to us. Big time. More students will study at home, more will take degrees abroad, and more will incorporate non-degree education abroad into their home programs, and there will be a growth in the supply or suppliers and a diversification of options for learning in other locations. Here's the only question. Do you want to be, do we, I put myself in the same boat, do we want to be responsive to a changing marketplace or just ignore it? Back to the marketing question. Okay, shifting motivation, I've already talked about some things that institutions have to do. Money and cost becomes very important. I've highlighted this particular line in red. This strategy becomes very important from the cost point of view. Shrinking the marginal costs of education abroad compared to staying at home or on campus. Because that's the calculation that parents and students do in thinking about, from a money point of view, can I afford education abroad? And the question is, how much more is it going to cost me? That's the marginal cost. So that's where the pressure point is going to intensify in issues of mobility. Who will compete? All right, now I got some good news for you. So I'm probably going to stop with this slide because we don't want to stop with bad news, right? So the good news is, who will compete well in student flows? Reputation, reputation, reputation. So how's the reputation of the German higher education system? Pretty darn good, okay? So you've already got a leg up on most people, most countries. Cost competitiveness, well, pretty good because it's free until recently, right? Now, what is it, 1,000 euros? Westphalia, did I hear right? Westphalia's imposed 1,000. Okay, per semester, is it? Okay, well, you're still cheap. You know how much I charge not me personally, just don't get your gun out and shoot me, okay? My institution charges international students tuition for a year, 2 semesters, right? $32,000, okay? Are you cost competitive? Oh yeah, okay? Innovation in pedagogy and models. This is where maybe there's some thinking to be done by all of us in higher education, okay? Why don't we do it that way? Because we don't do it that way. Well, why don't we do it that way? Because we've never done it that way. Well, could we think of doing something different? Nope. Okay. Country, location of interest, good place. All right? Okay, I'm done. All right. Thank you. So even with a little extra time, I've been a bad boy, but I think we still have some time for some Q&A. Okay, you can queue, and then I'll find somebody to answer the question for you, okay? Everybody
Ja,
goes,
wer möchte anfangen
no.
mit Fragen?
It's time for a break, John.
So, wer hat Fragen?
Huh?
Who has questions?
Yeah.
Please. Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Hello, thank you, I guess, on behalf of everybody, since I'm the first one with the Q&A, for your anecdotes and for your facts. I think the combination made it quite challenging for us to really rethink some of our positions as well. First, you talked about 2 terms, third mission. On the one hand, you used that in the slide, but before you said social mission. Where's the difference between the two? Do you use them on the same level? I ask this because yesterday we had a discussion about that in our rectorate. Second, I would like a prescription to the tablet that you take every morning for internationalization, just in case that my colleagues would need it at home.
Yeah, okay. Actually, I'll tell you about it in private, okay, about that second one. If I understand your first question, let me see if this clarifies what I mean by first, second, and third mission, okay? First mission of higher education, teaching and learning, okay? Second mission, research and scholarship, or generating new knowledge, okay, which presumably then gets plugged back into teaching and learning. The third mission, I'm particularly sensitive to because I come from a U.S. land-grant institution. Land-grant institutions were begun in the 1850s to do 2 things. One, to provide access to the sons and daughters of ordinary people, not the elite. So there's a huge access sort of mission and core value associated with land-grant institutions. We take kids from all SES and increasingly now higher education throughout the world does. But back then it was in response to, you didn't go to college unless you came from a rich family, okay? The second mission had to do with how do institutions of higher learning engage in helping their local communities solve problems, make advancements. What those problems be, they might be in health, they might be in sustainable agriculture, which is why a lot of the land-grant institutions were very much agriculturally based because that was essentially the industry back then. So this whole notion of community engagement, community problem solving, and developing a partnership between the institution and the communities they serve to define problems and solutions that worked. Now that's the theory of the third mission, okay? And to my way of thinking, that's the piece we've sort of left out of the internationalization of higher education. And the consequences have been Trump, Brexit, et cetera. Does that answer your question, or did I miss what you were asking?
Basically, which term do you prefer? But which term do you prefer? Is it the third mission term? Is it the social? Is there a discussion about that at home at all?
Yeah, I know. The folks in charge of the third mission keep changing the title of the third mission about every other Sunday, okay? I call it, if you really wanted a title other than the third mission is community engagement and problem solving. That's the one I sort of prefer, because I think it communicates, right? Okay.
Yeah, more questions.
You better have questions, because the coffee's not ready, so you'll have to sit here anyway. Well, let me just say one other thing. I don't want what I was saying to sound like it was directed to one place. This stuff I was talking about today, I can assure you, it doesn't matter which country or institution I'm in, it applies to all of us. I'd like to have you think about a business or an industry or a service that hasn't fundamentally changed the way it does its job for 100 years, and then ask another question: how effective are they today? And that's the challenge that's before us. The core of higher education and the way we think about ourselves, organize ourselves, and so forth, hasn't really fundamentally changed in the last 100 years. That makes me suspicious, okay, about whether or not there might be something new to try, okay? So I point the finger this way too, because I'm guilty of all that. Why did I do my job the way I did my job when I was doing a job? Because that's the way I did it.
In the beginning, you were talking about the internationalization of curriculum at home.
Yeah.
I was wondering how you would measure the international proportion of curriculum.
Good. Actually, I'm going to give you a great source on that issue. Her name is Betty Leask, L-E-A-S-K. She's from Australia, and she's written a ton on this. Betty Leask, L-E-A-S-K. And she has a very, very good integrated approach to what does it mean to internationalize the curriculum, and then how do you know whether or not you got it internationalized or not. Now, that's the shove-off answer. Call Betty, okay? But I'll give you my version, because I've written a little bit about this, but not like Betty, okay? I think about the stages of internationalizing the curriculum. I'm being a little bit unfair here, but so a directive comes down. This is almost literally a true story. The accreditation agencies in the United States for business and engineering programs decided that they were going to force the internationalization of undergraduate curricula in business and engineering. So they said, you will do that. How you do it is up to you, but then you're going to report to us what you did. So here's stage one of internationalization. In a 15-week semester, the course session in the 8th week dealt with how do they do this elsewhere? And talking about business or engineering practice in the United States for the first 7 weeks, stop, hold, 8th week, elsewhere, stop, forget that, back to week 9, week 15. Okay, they just added a little thing. Never got integrated, okay? The second stage was to think about, let's look across the syllabus for all 15 weeks and ask ourselves the question, how would introducing international, comparative, or global content in these individual topics begin to change how we thought about these things, okay? A little more integration, okay? And not just, okay, I had to surrender one of my 15 weeks to this international junk, okay? But now you had to really start thinking about how it fit into the course. The third level, which you don't see a lot of, which is very difficult, and I'll pick engineering, because people will say, engineering is engineering, you know? There are rules, okay? You need a slide rule, you know, you need the book that has a bunch of formulas in it, and that's the way you build a building, right? Not really. You know, there's some subtle things as a part of engineering, like design, which is highly culturally dependent, okay? So how do the introduction of theories and concepts from other cultures begin to change the way, for instance, that you apply science? Different ways of thinking is really what we're talking about here. Different questions get asked that were never asked before. And the answers become different, because now you're looking through the lens of a different culture or different cultures. It's sort of that third stage that is, to my way of thinking, is really what internationalizing curriculum should be about, but that's very difficult to do, which is why we don't see it very much. But the real answer, read Betty.
Okay, there's time for one last question, please.
Professor, thank you for your very interesting presentation. I was on the other side watching on TV and came here to
you were in
ask
the other
a question.
Room. I forgot to wave to you guys. Sorry. Hello.
And we are conducting a research project about international students in Germany, and I have a question about the issue. You mentioned, when you talk about international students in Germany, there is a difference between those who come to Germany to do higher education and those foreigners who live here and maybe did their high school process here in Germany. When you look at the literature in the United States, you see how diverse the statistics are when it comes to ethnicity. I mean by that you differentiate amongst Hispanics, Asian Americans, African Americans, and stuff like that. So my question basically is, how do you differentiate who are really foreigners who travel to the United States to pursue higher education and the foreigners who live in the country and who enter the system? And second question, really quickly, do you charge these $32,000 to international students or to everybody? Or in other words, are foreigners paying more?
That last one is easily answered. For a public institution, we have in-state tuition and out-of-state tuition. International students are from out-of-state. They get charged the out-of-state tuition rate. Plus, about 3 years ago, somebody said, hey, you know, we've got almost 8,000 international students on campus. What if we charged each of them an extra $1,000 because they cost us more? Which is a bunch of baloney, but okay. So that's a lot of money. So basically, the base is what gets charged to any out-of-state student, okay? Let me try to answer your first question. And it's complicated because we are, and have been for a long time, as you know, an ethnically diverse country. So we look at Hispanic Americans who are fifth generation Americans. Are they foreigners? Depends on who you talk to, okay? If you talk to somebody who doesn't share my value system, they say they're foreigners because they don't look like me, okay? But then you've got recent entrants to the country who aren't citizens, both legal and illegal. And the question is, what are they? Well, it's pretty clear that they're not domestic, okay? They're some shade of foreign. But the diversity in the populations, we've got, my campus in the international student body and then the international community around Michigan State University, which is, East Lansing, Michigan has about 70,000 people. The university has 50,000 students, and the Lansing metropolitan area has a little over 500,000 people, okay? There are 110 countries represented in those populations, and at the university alone, there's 105. So, our situation is compounded by the diversity of people who didn't arrive on the Mayflower. I mean, I don't know how to express it. But, we do have another problem. We talk and we try as hard as we can to integrate international students into the living and learning environments on the campus. And that happens in the residence halls. We've got residence halls for about 24,000 students. It is a requirement in your freshman year that you live in a residence hall. Students are randomly assigned. So we have students from all over the world bunking with students from the United States. After the first year, they can go do what they want. They go rent apartments. Who do they go rent apartments with? Their buddies. Now there's some victories, okay, but we need more. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Hudzik, for this inspiring speech, an exciting start for our conference.